we just paused.
Okay.
Part 2. Okay, part 2. Let's talk about one of these. The first of these. Oh, by the way, if you're arriving to this part 2, this is the GMS Magazine podcast, a podcast all about board games, role playing games, the people who play them. So the people who make them, and sometimes the people who play them. I'm Paco Garcia.
Stress from DSX Machina.
There you go. Well, okay. Jason Bullman from Paizo released a tweet a few days ago where he literally asked the guy, I can't remember his name, and I don't really want to remember his name because he's just a news anchor, not a very good one at that. And the Orange Baboon is appointing this monkey to be the Ministry of Defense in the United States. Needless to say, this is the kind of people who says that trans folk should not be in the army, and he wants to bring back the don't ask, don't tell policy for the LGBTQI plus community within the United States Army. He is a complete and utter shite of a person, and I can't imagine things going well with him in charge. But apparently, when he did the tours in Iraq that he did when he was serving, he was playing role-playing games with his buddies. He's a role player, and he's a known Pathfinder role player. And Jason Bullman released a tweet saying that he wishes that this wanker gave his books back.
Oh.
Of course, the right-wing rollosphere went completely ballistic.
Well, he did it on Twitter.
Yeah, that was kind of probably on purpose.
Yeah, it's like jumping into the lion's den and stroking its bits and
pretty much. So there was a bunch of people even asking Paizo, how do I send my books back? Give me my money back. Which Paizo is like, excuse me? Exactly how? Well, yeah, no, you don't need to tell me how stupid you are.
It's stupid people, yes.
Yeah. So there you go. I mean, I am saying that they're stupid for saying that. Paizo probably didn't say something like that. I'm sure they thought.
So I was getting worried. So this is a positive Paizo post.
Yes, except
I was getting worried for a second.
No,
he tweeted something. Oh,
no. The funny thing, the really funny thing, is how people are actually accusing Jason of gatekeeping. Because they
oh, come on.
I thought it was absolutely hilarious. It really is like, oh my God, you have, I mean, you cannot spell gatekeeping. How are you going to understand a 4 syllables word? Seriously, you can't. Obviously, you cannot know what gatekeeping actually means. And then I saw some people jumping on the bandwagon of this, saying how this revised edition of Dungeons and Dragons is doing really so badly that Wizards of the Coast is losing lots of money because nobody's buying it. Nobody's buying it because younger players don't spend money because they're stingy and they don't have jobs and they don't have money to spend. And the older gamer is going away because they don't want to live in a world where the drow are not evil and where you can eat chimichangas and tacos with the orcs because orcs now are Mexican, and that is very racist. Sorry, I know. The whole thing is absolutely bonkers beyond words. Oh, and that the coup de grace for Wizards of the Coast is going to be when Critical Role releases Cosmere or whatever it is that they're releasing, and that is going to draw so many people away from Dungeons and Dragons that is going to completely kill Wizards of the Coast. Sorry. Oh my God, please say something. I can't stop laughing right now.
It's more of that real disappointing, like that tribalism where people just have to like.
Sorry.
I don't get it. Like I said, for me, it's on a related point. This was something that was announced. The fact that in Polygon on January 14th. Charlie Hall wrote about the remarkably thin release schedule for D&D in 2025. And it presents an opportunity for indie gamers, specifically saying the fact that in 1997, publisher TSR, because they couldn't publish any new products because of their outstanding debts with their printers, a lot of other distributors reported huge increases in sales. Shadowrun had an increase of 20% during that time. Palladium sales went up as well. And this creates an opportunity, not just for completely different non-D&D rule sets, but for people who play D&D or 5e to fill in that niche. And
okay,
I would like that to be a situation. I do see a massive upswell still of 5e compatible stuff on Kickstarter, which I definitely like to see. That there is an upswell of that, and I'm looking forward to seeing if that's true, considering I am relaunching my next 5e campaign in March.
Well, okay. I don't think there's going to be a massive upsurge in people migrating from Dungeons and Dragons into other games, because I heard this in another podcast a few days ago. People, if you don't know the Daiku podcast, you should get onto it. We're going to have an interview released with Gary, the person who runs that podcast, and he does some interview, and I can't remember exactly who he was chatting with. But the guest very wisely says the world of role-playing games is Dungeons and Dragons, and then every other role-playing game.
The rest, yeah.
Dungeons and Dragons in it is its own industry. If the rest of role-playing games suddenly disappeared off the face of the earth, Dungeons and Dragons would continue. And if Dungeons and Dragons disappeared, the rest of the games would continue pretty much the same. Because they are different, even though they are the same product, they are different industries. They work at different scales for different reasons, and they are different industries. And I completely agree with that. So I reckon that Wizards of the Coast releasing fewer games or fewer books over 2025 doesn't mean that people are going to go on to different games. They simply are going to go to different publishers of 5e and 5e revised.
I mean, I like to think that's true, considering that, and we'll talk about that in a second. Go ahead. But
and the reason I say that is because there is so many 5e products out there already that people truly, it's not that they don't need Dungeons and Dragons. They don't need Wizards of the Coast to keep playing Dungeons and Dragons, even if Dungeons and Dragons goes for under a different name, but it's still D&D. The spirit of D&D is there. The gameplay of D&D is there. The ethos of D&D is there. Even if you call it mystified or whatever, the spirit of D&D is there. So that's why I don't think that that's going to see a surge of people going onto Green Ronin, Pelgrane Press, Paizo. I don't think that's going to happen just because Wizards is publishing just a handful of books over this year.
Well, and that brings up the other follow-up, which I think is interesting. And once again, this is the reason why I have issues whenever people refer to an edition by a year. So Dungeons and Dragons releasing these new variations, but they're not calling 5.5. They're calling the 2024 edition. I wish they wouldn't. They just call it 5.5 and be done with it. I don't know why they're continuing to insist the rebranding, especially considering that while the Player's Handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide came out in 2024, the Monster Manual comes out in 2025. So if you look at the Amazon entry, it says Dungeons and Dragons Monster Manual Hardcore 2024 releases February 18th, 2025. So, but beyond that, the new Monster Manual is coming up. It's boasting the largest Monster Manual they've ever had, 500 total, 75 new ones, and new variations, and 40 plus versatile humanoid stat blocks, which is kind of neat. But the other thing, of course, has been announced by N-World just a few days ago as well, last Thursday. There was an announcement that showed new pages. Now, for those people who may be surprised, just remember the fact that these monster stat blocks are recognizable because we saw these monster stat blocks in the Player's Handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide. They have modified them a tiny marginal bit. The old stat blocks did not have an initiative modifier. Now there is one next to AC. I noticed that the AC doesn't tell you where the armor comes from now. I never cared, so why should we care where the armor comes from? It's natural armor or wearing armor. It doesn't matter. So they're not saying that anymore. And the stat blocks, of course, now have the attribute modifier listed next to the saving throw and ability modifier, which they've done. So there's not a huge visual difference, but I did notice that they have done away with legendary actions and replaced them with just giving like an ancient green dragon, for example, simply can do 3 reactions a turn, and it tells you the trigger and the response. So there's some visual stuffs, and some monsters will actually probably be rebuilt and so forth. And they're also including the proficiency bonus with the XP reward, which is another new thing that they've added in with this book. Okay. So that's coming out next month. I just wanted to mention that. I'm working on my Xenobestiary, which is a sci-fi monster manual. This book is following that presentation format. So when this book releases, probably, my guess is probably March, it will have the same presentation as the 2024 Monster Manual. So that's one thing to consider, and just to do the announcement there. But Monster Manual coming out in about 2 weeks.
Good. So, okay. So that was it about people. Let us know. What do you think about, well, firstly, Jason Bullman's tweet. Do you think that, fascists have a place in the hobby? I don't think so. And what do you think about, well, people are going to go from D&D into other games, or are they just going to continue playing D&D, but buying products from other publishers? What do you think? Okay. Next topic. We're going back into AI. Let's talk AI. And this time, it involves Critical Role, but not directly. It has transpired that somebody has taken the Sunless Citadel and then the transcript of 160 episodes of Critical Role.
No idea it's that big.
Yeah, and it's fan-made. So it is something that people have transcribed out of the kindness of their hearts, so they can cross-reference, they can tag, they can look within, basically, so they can reference in detail all the episodes of Critical Role. This is not something that has been done out of any desire for fame or money or anything at all. It's just out of the love for Critical Role and its fandom. So they have taken the Sunless Citadel and those transcriptions, and they have used it for a university paper by feeding it into an AI model to do whatever it is they wanted to do with it. Up to there, okay, it's a gray area. I wouldn't have done that without permission, and I would have consulted Critical Role before doing it, even if it is for a university project. Where things get murky is that all those results, all that work is actually being used to train a commercial AI database outside of the reach of the initial player who was doing it for their university project.
Yeah.
So, what do you think about people using fan-made content, something that Critical Role, who have been, and I am not one for very quickly defending Critical Role, but this time I have to, because they have been very clear and said very loudly, fuck AI. They're not keen on it, they don't want it, they don't support it. And yet, their material indirectly, without specific consent, as far as I know, has been used to train an AI without their knowledge. Even if it is for a university project, I think we are on very, very dodgy grounds here. What do you think?
Okay, so there's a couple of things to consider here. We got to divorce the one concept of, as right now, we still, in a lot of circuits, there is still no establishment that says that training a large language model off of copyrighted work is theft. We believe it is, and we are seeing more situations where courts are starting to move in a direction where they can try to protect the artists while corporations are fighting back. But currently in Canada and in the United States, there is still no umbrella protection for artists of any capacity, any creative effort to protect them from being implemented in large language models. Let's get that out of the way. But let's assume, just for a second, that we will equate that theft with copyright infringement. Like right now, we hope there will be a day where that will be legally connected. But let's assume it is legally connected. And if so, what this university student did was absolutely immoral and unethical. And I will go to a precedent. If you are an author and you have written a short story, and then a student filmmaker, wants to make a short film based off of your short story or your novel, you still need to get permission from that author to do a short film. This has had a precedent. It's actually happened. Harlan Ellison, who is a very litigious, protective author, passed away several years ago, has said that, and he received a letter from somebody who's going to do it for their student film, a work based off of one of his short stories. He called that student up and said, "You can't do that. It's copyrighted." And then he made an emphatic plea to the audience, and he says, to all those students out there and those filmmakers, your teachers are screwing and jerking you around. You cannot take a copyrighted work and do anything with it under any circumstances. But he says that is something you can do. All you need to do is contact me. We will create a legal document which protects you and me, and you can then use that work for free for those purposes. Another good example of this is Stephen King's Dollar Baby system, where if you're a student making a short film, or even just an aspiring filmmaker, you can secure the rights to a Stephen King story for $1, and you get rights to make a film from that as long as you do not make money off of that project. This went on for decades. It only recently finally shut down after decades of being in operation. And it started the filmmaking careers of people like Frank Darabont, who started his career with a Dollar Babies film project. So there are legal precedents. So if we're willing to say that a corporation or a company, a commercial system effort is stealing unethically any form of large models, whether it be creative art in any capacity, if that's immoral, then that has to extend to students in that property. They have to seek permission. Otherwise, they are crossing that same potentially legal boundary that any commercial enterprise is. So for this student to say, I was just a student doing this project, from a legal standpoint, you are not protected for doing that. You do not get a free pass to violate copyright just because you're a student.
I agree. And the thing is, and this is why I think it's even worse in this case, you're not just using, because I can, okay, let's say for a second that you're going to use Critical Role's data to create a paper on the evolution of the adventuring language over a period of time in a closed gaming environment. You're basically going to study how the players, how the Critical Role team change the way that they play, and they express what they express while they play linguistically over 160 gaming sessions. Fine by me. You're taking something and creating something completely different that is related, but it's completely different. But when you're feeding that data to train an AI, you are doing it on the basis that this thing could or will regurgitate data that you don't know how it's going to be regurgitated. You cannot possibly guarantee its accuracy. You cannot guarantee the legitimacy. And now it has been proven that you cannot guarantee its safety. So basically, if you didn't write it, paint it, say it, sculpt it, don't use it. Ask for it first. That's, to me, that is absolute.
And that was
paramount.
ultimately, like, for me, we had, and we still haven't changed the policy, but my company had a policy on AI saying that we will not use AI to circumvent artists, but I am not going to run a microscope on my established artists to ensure that they never play with AI in their own capacity. I'm kind of staying firm on that, and I've also gone further in the fact that I will no longer use AI. Like I have no subscriptions to any form of large language model visual engines to create art, even for the purposes of communicating that with artists. I thought I was doing it, but then I realized at the end of the day that I just don't want to touch it anymore. But that's was at the point. The other thing, which I thought was really interesting, there's been this rise of this fight now, especially within the right wing ergosphere, stating that there has been this opinion that the reason why so many people are using AI art is because they always felt there was a level of elitism with graphic designers, and then there's this similar association with the reason why there's been so little sympathy from the right for the California wildfires, saying, well, all these uppity elitist actors are finally getting their comeuppance. And someone says 98% of actors in Hollywood have other jobs. Only 2% of them have it as their full-time profession. It's this perception and this surface perception, because right-wing people never look for depth. They look at the surface, they get their reactionary, and then they go on from there.
Why does this society have this idea that if you have something and you lose it, you lost it, and if you don't have it, it's like, oh, well, you don't have it because you don't want to and you don't deserve it. So basically, if you work for something, or you're lucky or talented to be able to achieve something, I am no fan or defender of rich people. Okay, I really am not. But okay, that some actors and actresses, some people have actually managed to make an awful lot of money by performing in films that have become very successful. Okay, and now we're going to cheer them losing everything and putting everyone with a label actor in there? That's petty. That's horrifically inhumane. But the thing is, they also think, oh, well, you're poor, so screw you. You should be, working harder. You're poor because you want to. So what is it? Is it bad if people have things and they deserve to lose it? And it's bad if people don't have them and they deserve to be even worse because they didn't do any better? Which one is it? Could people please make up their minds? This is
the
disturbing.
result of 40 years of tribalism and propaganda from America to hate elitism and to value physical labor, and the fact that unless you're working as a slave labor, you're not truly working.
But everybody wants elitism. I mean, everybody wants to work to be in the elite. You know, this is the American dream, that you work hard and you go to do everything and you follow your dreams, you will get there. That's what everybody wants. People look at the Elon Musk and everybody wants to be like him, or Jeff Bezos, and everybody wants to be like him. And yet, when people get to be like them and something bad happens, we cheer that. People who may be perfectly innocent and hardworking, and they just happen to be talented. And for the record, the creative industry, especially in the world of role-playing games, is by far the worst treated, the one that makes the fewest and the littlest amount of money, and the ones that have to work the hardest for the little money that they actually get. So if people think that an artist who makes a living out of role-playing games is some sort of elitism, we have no idea how fucking removed from reality they are. Because it is horrifically hard to make a living in the world of role-playing games. And if anybody thinks otherwise, try it or shut the fuck up. Seriously, it drives me mad when people say that.
And I've also stated unequivocally that, and this is something what we've said to death, so I won't go much into it. No matter how bad you think the visual large language models have had an effect on the visual industry, it doesn't come close to what the effect it's having in the literary industry with ChatGPT.
Indeed.
But that's like I said, that's us banging a horse that we banged in a lot. But that was my view. My quick view is that there are legal protections for things like the fan subs, which things that are transformative. So the fan transcripts there's a precedent for protection, and I'm also sure that Critical Role has supported this practice. But then to use that in a large language model in any capacity, I think violates ethics.
I agree.
If this guy reached out I assume this is a large collective of people that are doing these transcripts. If he went to this collective, assuming that they are a collective and not just a random scattering of people across the world, and he just said, I'm using this as a large language model for a student assignment, and if he makes an absolute legal assurance that this model is going to be isolated to this student project and will never be used, he could have gotten a legal agreement so that there wouldn't be an ethical boundary. He could have gotten that consent. It might have been extremely difficult, right? He also legally could have gone to Critical Role and got their consent, and then he could have, and this is where things get a little funny. He could have gotten consent from Critical Role for that application, for an isolated, self-enclosed student project, and then use the transcript. And this is where things get interesting. If he has Critical Role's permission, he doesn't need the fan community's permission for the transcript. Unfortunately, that's kind of how that legal system works. If he has permission from one, he doesn't need permission necessarily from the other for the large transcript. Personally, I think that if he wanted permission, he needed permission from Critical Role at the very least.
I agree.
That's just my opinion. Yeah.
So anyway, this is the topic that I wanted to talk about for today. So let's make a quick pause and go on to part 3.